it just another day of theater going, or did we see something special, like Dan Lauria's Just Another Day, which finds an elderly couple with faulty memories meeting daily on a bench, trying to figure out their relationship to each other and to themselves. It's ambiguous if they are in limbo or a special care facility for Alzheimer's or dementia. It starts out rather crudely with wildly sexist jokes and behavior that would certainly get themselves canceled if anyone was listening, but they are of the Rodney Dangerfield or Henny Youngman type of humor era. They love old movies and making up plots for their lives as their renewed feelings poke out more and more each time they encounter each other on the bench. They both value creativity and enriched vocabulary and wordplay. In the hands of pros like Dan Lauria, who wrote the play, and Patty McCormick, this is very poignant and familiar. And for a play about memory, a memory returned to me. As a comic back in the day, comics would have lines prepared to shoot down hecklers. I particularly remember using, "What a pity your parents never had any children." Dan Lauria added, "What a pity your parents never had any children that lived." This is a play that may offend, make you laugh or cry, but still feel all warm and gooey inside. Happy face minus. Amy Herzog's Mary Jane is back at Manhattan Theater Club. It was originally, I think I saw it at New York Theater Workshop. Anyway, you have Mary Jane, who is played by Rachel McAdams, is a single mother trying to deal with the serious health condition of her child, Alex. Her child suffers from a life-threatening illness, and her husband has abandoned her. And she's has these nurses, that very caring nurses that come in and help her out, and she really is trying her darndest to keep everything together. And she hides her pain in funny little anecdotes and humorous dialogue, and it's just so beautifully done. And it's got the wonderful April Mathis in it, who plays various characters. And you've got Lily Santiago, who plays the very desired music therapist, who she really wants to help her son, survive. It's just a very touching and wonderful play done by an incredible cast.
You see, this play in the beginning kind of little confusing because I did not know what the situation of the who is ill. I knew somebody is ill in the room, which we never see the person who's very, very sick, and she's the single mother. We understood that, but finally you realize that the seriousness of the child's illness, and then I understood why. Rachel McAdams' character was always making jokes and trying to be humorous because this was her way to deal with that enormous pain she was suffering because of the terminal illness of the child. And and then she had Lily Santiago, who comes to comfort and play the most beautiful music, and the woman who comes to take care of the child was excellent. What was her name again?
There's Susan Parfour, and there's
I think Susan Parfour.
Mathis. There's
Yeah,
three.
okay. So the lady who comes to check, the nurse actually, and she was like very, very involved with the child, and she was really, really dedicated, and she was a wonderful character, and she did a great job. But then this scene shifts to the hospital, and I think the way they did it, it was very, very nice, technicality, beautiful, and I began to like the play more at the end, towards the end, than in the beginning, because I understood more, and I give a happy face.
And I give it a happy face too. Lucy Kirkwood's The Welkin at Atlantic Theater Company takes place in 18th century England, where a condemned woman, Sally Poppy, has to prove that she is pregnant to a group of hardworking women in order to escape the gallows. Elizabeth Luke, played by Sandra Oh, by the way, is a midwife of the town who fiercely defends Sally, who is defiant against the odds and doesn't even want Elizabeth's help. Why does Sally have animosity towards a well-respected midwife who brought her into this world? You've got the disparity between the classes and sexes. Will the women condemn one of their own just to get back to harvesting leeks and other pressing housework chores? Will the better classes sway the vote against the wretched girl that the whole town has condemned already and want her hanged for allegedly killing the child of the lady of the manor? Meanwhile, her husband, the Lord, has free rein to rape all the girls in his employ, some as young as 13. Mr. Coombs, the bailiff, has to remain in the room with strict orders to adhere to, which seem rather draconian. This has an illustrious cast of women. And funny enough, Haley Wong and Susanna Perkins were recently in this brilliant medieval play, Mary Gets Hers. They are timeless actors. Haley Wong tore up the stage. It's hard to know whether to root for her or be like the rest of the mob and just want this nonconformist destroyed. Sandra Oh tries valiantly to save Sally, who just snarls at her attempt. This could be the counterpart and be called 12 Angry Women. It is superbly acted, written, directed with magnificent production values. It will leave you reeling. Happy Face Plus.
At Irish Repertory Theatre, you could see Molly Sweeny, written by Brian Friel and directed by Charlotte Moore. Molly Sweeny is a 30-something-year-old woman who has been blind since she was 10 months old. Her husband is a self-taught man with many strange passions. His newest one is to cure his wife and make her see. There's a doctor in town who sort of fell apart when his wife left with another colleague, and he sees, making Molly see again as a way to be on top of things. But will they really be helping Molly? They feel she has nothing to lose, but she's so much in control of her tactile world that, an operation could throw her completely off balance, and the guys don't really consider that. I love the writing of this. It's done in interlaced monologues, but they are so beautifully written and so nicely orchestrated that to me it was very exciting and quite magnificent. Definite Happy Face plus.
The doctor was played by Rufus Collins, and the husband was played by John Keating, who is one of my favorite Irish actors. He's always so wonderful. Molly Sweeny was played by Sarah Street. It just shows how all these people are using Molly to their own purposes and not really caring about her. Well, her father, which he talks about, really cared about her and really taught her how to be independent and taught her about trees and birds and really got her to really go into herself. And these people are trying to take her out of herself and possibly destroy her. We don't know this. We will find out, but find out yourself. And my problem is I do not like monologue plays. This is a monologue. There's these three people and they're telling you what's going on. And I have trouble with that. And I kind of find that boring. So the play itself was not, the acting was stupendous. So I'm just giving it a happy face minus. Thomas Klingenstein's Our American Queen is a fascinating look at the presidential election of 1864. Kate Chase is determined that her father, Salmon Chase, should run against Abraham Lincoln for the Republican nomination of the presidency. At the moment, Salmon is content to be Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury. He is still reeling from losing his election to be the senator from Ohio. Kate has it all worked out. She will throw the grandest party and attract all the power players. Also, she will marry William Sprague, the wealthy governor of Rhode Island, to help finance her father's campaign. She even uses her former flirtations with General George McClellan to secure his support for her father's candidacy. Then there is her budding friendship with John Hay, private secretary and personal assistant to Lincoln, which her father disapproves of. Kate and John discuss books and poetry. He is quite the poet himself and really admires Whitman. They are discussing the merits of Dickens' Great Expectations and should Pip and Estella end up together. Underlying political aspirations is a family drama of Kate, who was sent away as a child of 8 to a boarding school for 10 years after her mother died, leaving her with a sense of abandonment. And now her father is courting Carlotte Eastman, who Kate in turn does not approve of. Will Kate's plotting be successful? Will she get what she really wants? And does she even know? This was beautifully done by everyone involved. From Oliva Bonzanesi Blitz's exquisite period costumes, there was this stunning purple dress I wanted to steal, to Neil Wilkinson's set of just a long table and chairs and place settings to show the progression of the plot. The cast were very plausible in their 19th century personas. I felt like I was back in 1864 seeing history unfold before my eyes. This was funny and poignant and so relevant to today's issues. Happy Face Plus.
AMT presents David, a new musical about biblical King David circa 1000 BCE. It's music by Alfred Tapper, book and lyrics by Martha Rosenblatt, Gary Glickstein and Albert Tapper, directed and choreographed by Kyle Pleasant. And it deals with the older David getting ready to die, and Solomon will become the new king. And it flashes back to young David, the slingshot that killed Goliath, his friendship with Saul, King Saul's son Jonathan, marriage to Saul's daughter Michal. And it's just very strange. Everything about it seems off. The choreography seems like it's almost like a Saturday Night Live sketch about bad choreography, but I think it's supposed to be taken seriously. And I would say avoid the musical, read the wonderful historical novel by Geraldine Brooks, which really deals so much more with David being a musician that you would think a musical would deal with, but it didn't. And there's a very odd sequence about Sodom and Gomorrah that I don't think has anything to do with David, as far as I know. So I liked some of the performers. The young David was played by Ethan Zeff, who's quite gorgeous, but he doesn't have the red hair that they're always talking about. And he seems a bit too sweet to be the military and sometimes cruel genius that the biblical king was. But at any rate, I was expecting to like this, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So I gave it Unhappy Face Plus.
Also, we should say that he's planning his funeral and he wants Nathan to do the eulogy. And Nathan comes on and he's talking all this to Nathan. Old David was played by Timothy Warman, and Nathan was playing Kenny Morris. And all I could think of while I was talking about Nathan was good old reliable Nathan the prophet. And of course, Nathan as a prophet kept dropping all these profound statements. And he goes, I don't understand that, but I'm a prophet. I'm supposed to say stuff like that. And that was kind of funny. I almost felt this took place during the exile, because I don't know how many Jews were actually in the cast itself. And also, it opened with this money number that was like strange. But I gotta say this, I found the music very jaunty, which again, you don't expect biblical epics to have such jaunty music. I expected them to break into soft shoe at any minute. I'm sorry. I just found this such a misfire. It just didn't work. I mean, it was a hardworking cast. It's a good idea, but I just didn't care for it. So I'm giving it a mixed face minus. The estimable NAATCO company is doing Reed Tang's Isabel, directed by Kedian Keohan, with Sagan Chen and Haruna Lee, whom I adore, who plays Isabel, and Nine. Anyway, this is just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's beyond weird, but enjoyable, because it also turns into a WTF play, because it's random scenes that make absolutely no sense. Matt is in the woods in this like abandoned house, it looks like, and his neighbor is also called Matt, and then Matt's brother or sister comes named Harry, but is really Harriet because we see them later on in a skirt with a mustache. And Harriet's girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, is Haruna Lee Isabel. And they're in this forest where there's this weird staircase that goes nowhere. And all the forest rangers say, don't go near the stair or touch it, or bad things will happen to you. And then the guy turns into a backpack at one point. He's an actual backpack, but now he's called Lowe's. And I think the whole point of the thing was something to do with pronouns and gender fluidity, but I have no idea what was going on. I just like Haruna Lee. I like watching Haruna Lee, but as far as this play goes, it's like, oh God. I mean, I was engaged while it was going on because it's like each little scene was sort of interesting, but it didn't add up to anything.
I have to agree with Eva on this. I am not familiar with either this troupe or the actress that she mentioned. But when I read the press release, it sounded like an intriguing premise. It sounded more like a ghost story, and that's actually how it started out, with this guy who bought this falling down ramshackle house in the middle of nowhere, who has a neighbor that is either far away or not far away, and his friends come to visit him, or maybe it's his family, and at one point they disappear. And when the mother, who is portrayed as a screaming mountain lion, speaks, she roars, and she reports their disappearance to the forest ranger, and she says either they're 13 or they're 10 years older. And time is very fluid in this play. It bounces back and forth. Scenes are repeated over and over again with different permutations. It's sort of Rashomon-like, but it doesn't have the cohesion that Rashomon does. I did not understand it in the slightest. I truly did not. And unfortunately, the high point for me was at the end, when they basically gave us all little bags of Japanese snacks to take away with us, which basically doesn't say much about the piece. I would not recommend it because it basically turns from a ghost story into this thing about gender permutation and gender fluidity and he, she, they, them. It makes no sense whatsoever. I'm sure it's put on for Pride Month, but I give it an unhappy face.
And I'm a backpack now. So I'm giving it, and I'm going to appear and disappear just like this play did with this weird scenes. And I'm giving it, I'll give it a mixed face minus because I like NAATCO. I like Haruna Lee. There were some elements I liked, but basically it's a weird, but this is the first time a weird but enjoyable play becomes a WTF play. So there you have it.
Roundabout Theater Company is reviving the late Samuel Williams' 1979 play Home, which follows the farmer Cephas Miles from Crossroads, North Carolina, who spent some time in jail for refusing to fight the Vietnam War. He falls in love with the local girl, Patty May. She gets an education and for a while thinks she's better than him. He goes on a bit of a journey to the wicked big city and gets involved in sporting life, but later returns home. I didn't really care for this. It seemed like the three characters were not really responding so much to each other. It wasn't monologues, but I guess to me, it felt like it never connected with me. And I'm giving it mixed faces minus.
It had a beautiful set design by Arnulfo Maldonado and costume designs by Didi Ayit. And we should say that it had Tori Kittles as Cephas Miles, Brittany Inge as Patty Mae Wells, and Story Ayers as the other woman that played all the parts. And I mean, it was a touching story about, you know, how he's trying to do things, and he really believes in God, but God is in Miami taking a vacation. And he wishes, you know, that God would come back from vacation and help him out. It kind of reminded me of Tevye talking to God. And It was very touching, the love story between Patty May and Cephas. So there was enough to hang on to, but the first like half an hour was such a slog to get to the story. So you're kind of falling asleep, and then it kind of finally kicks in the story and you perk up, and then you kind of enjoy it. So for the first 30 minutes, I would actually give it an unhappy face, but the rest of it, I'd give a happy face. So this gets a mixed face from me. At St. Anne's Warehouse from South Africa is Twee Bering's Dark Noon, which covers a lot of American history, starting with the European arrivals in the mid-19th century and how they evolved into the land-grabbing Native American killers to keep their stolen land. Cowboys, prostitutes, sheriffs, gold seekers, cattle farmers, churchgoers, slave auctioneers were all portrayed, and many more, sometimes even involving confused audience members, and Easterners were compared to Westerners. In this biting satire and ultimate indictment of the gun-toting psyche of the Westerns and American culture, the South African actors donned blonde wigs and white powdered their faces. There were some deceptively funny moments and a quite brutal moment. All the while, wooden frames were put up representing homes, church, a bar that seemed to sell a lot of Coca-Cola, which was a favorite commodity. This reminded me of when we went to Brazil to visit relatives, and they kept giving us kids Coke, as that is what they thought Americans drink constantly, even at breakfast. I developed quite a distaste for Coca-Cola. I get that this was an important epic and extremely jam-packed by an extremely talented group of versatile actors, but it just got too cluttered and chaotic in parts. And while it was beautifully air-conditioned, I was still feeling the effects of the heat, and I was just so wiped out that I found myself drifting off now and then. So grab a tea or coffee to keep yourself alert and see American history through the eyes of South Africans and Western movies, mixed faith.
Currently showing at the Players Theater is Spit and Vigor's The Life and Times of the Wench Pirate Anne Bonny. Now, for anybody who likes pirates, you know that Anne Bonny is a real historical figure. She was one of the only two female pirates in the 18th century, and this was supposed to be a play about her life, so I was really looking forward to it. Spit and Vigor is a very interesting company. They do a lot of historical dramas and comedies, but they have an uneven performance record in my book. This play was not about Anne Bonny as I know her. It was written by and starred Sarah Fellini as Bonny, and it was this sort of quasi-mystical interlude in Bonny's life that had to do with love and marriage and adultery and islands that had animals on it that were the product of bestiality and witches, one of whom turned out to be Anne Bonny's mother, with no explanation of how she got there or why Anne Bonny's mother was a witch. The performances were enthusiastic, as they always are with Spit and Vigor. The sets were minimal but evocative. So yeah, it did look like parts of them were on a Spanish galleon or a pirate galleon, and others were on an island, and some were in a pub. But overall, it was just weird. There was another female pirate, Mary Read, also an actual historical figure who was supposedly Anne Bonny's lesbian lover, who was relegated to narrator, who spent the majority of her time on stage narrating giant chunks of exposition so they wouldn't have to actually do it within the piece. I wouldn't say this is one of Spit and Vigor's more successful performances, but I give them a mixed face for trying, because the subject matter should have been interesting, but it was in keeping with the stuff they do, like play they did about Elizabeth Countess Bathory, but mixed happy face for me, because they were enthusiastic, the costumes were okay, the sets were okay, the storyline was meh.
I basically agree with Lisa about this one. And there's more story to be told. Apparently Anne Bonny was with John Calico Jack Rackham, and they were having this affair, and her husband, John Bonny, with his friend, was going after Anne for revenge, and they picked up this female that the Anne Bonny had thrown overboard, and so there was a whole revenge plot going on too. I mean, the thing is, Spit and Vigor, I will always give them a chance because they're very hit or miss. When they're good, they are really, really good. And when they're not good, they're not good. So this one was just too weird for me. I wanted to hear more about Anne Bonny, and like Lisa said, it just had all this like weird, mystical, unexplainable stuff in it, but the pirate stuff was good. So I'm giving it a mixed face too. Roger Feather Kelly, whom I just adore as a choreographer, has written and directed The Fire, which takes place simultaneously in 1978, 1998, and 2021. In 1974, we watched Jay, a writer, and his solicitous lover, George. Jay is trying to write a story on Aphrodite, and his disapproving brother, Reggie, is coming over. In 1998, Sam is obsessed with his late father's notebooks, while his mother, Leslie, is concerned with him not getting out of the house enough. His sister, Rowan, just grumbles that all they do is fuss over Sam because he's depressed, but they're all sad about Dad. In 2021, the hedonistic Eli is preparing to have a party with his pod because it's COVID. He screws around indiscriminately and yet is flustered by Maurice. All the characters are restless, creative, worry about relationships, and drink tea and listen to the radio. And it's all taking place on the stage. So that you have one section here, one section there, and one section there, and they're like, it's just so confusing. But for 3/4 of the play, I can sort of follow the different scenarios in the different time frames and get a sense of what is going on in their life and become invested in them. But the narrative changes completely, and nobody is who I thought they were. And we were all talking about the play afterwards in the ladies' room, trying to make sense of it and couldn't. It's a shame because the cast was terrific. So I'm sorry, but I have to give this a mixed face. Our next show will be July 13th. And these are just a few items. I didn't have time to go crazy. But we've got the Crackpot Shakespeare Theories Volume 1 till June 30th from the City Gate Productions, who we love. The Waiting Room, an immersive theatrical experience powered by artificial intelligence, goes on June 29th, July 6th, 7th, and the 9th. Sylvia, Milo is back, this time with Magdalene. I Am the Utterance of My Name, going on till June 30th. Closing June 29th is Presencia from Oi Group and the Soul Project. And closing June 30th is Public Theater's mobile unit, The Comedy of Errors. And there's a memorial for Tony Lo Bianco, who died recently, which I'm sad about. A public ceremony will be at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City on July 12th at 10 a.m.